Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It is a pleasure to welcome you. My name is Gina Gulberti. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Launchmetrics. I hope that you're enjoying the Performance Summit. The theme of the panel discussion today is focused on closing the digital gap. We'll talk about the current state of luxury, about building brand equity, and how to become more strategic and more agile in this constantly evolving industry that we have today. I would like to say that if you have any questions, feel absolutely free to put them on the chat box that you can see on the right side of your screen. The team of Launchmetrics, my colleagues, will be responding during the session, and of course, we'll try to address some of them at the end of the conversation. And now I would like to welcome our special guest. Today we have with us Rupi Goel, Head of Luxury Retail at Google. Welcome, Rupi.
Thank you so much, Gina. Very, very excited to be here. And I'm seeing there are people from Italy, London, Canada, Milan. I think hello to everyone there. Hope you're staying safe and healthy. And Gina, huge congratulations. What an amazing lineup of series and sessions you've organized for everyone. So hope everyone is enjoying and getting excited by it as well.
Thank you so much, Rupi. It's a pleasure for us to have you here. Well, first of all, I would like to ask you, because obviously when you say I work at Google, it sounds like huge. You guys are like involved in many different projects all around the world. So first of all, I would like to ask you if you can explain a little bit more about you, about your role as a head of luxury retail at Google, and how you guys are like working with brands today.
Yes, of course. I think I remember someone asked me, do you sell any luxury products? Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. But I head up our luxury retail division, which means that we work with a lot of luxury clients, from brands such as LVMH, Gucci, Kering, to retailers such as Sephora, Farfetch, Lululemons of the world. And our idea is to help them with digital acceleration. And that could mean from a digital marketing perspective, it could mean from a data perspective, it could mean from a technology perspective. You know, as you know, last year, digital became kind of like the boardroom #1 topic. So this really accelerated, and our idea was to help our customers partner with them and take them on this journey of digital acceleration. Hope that simplifies the role a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We understand better now. Okay, so before we jump into the heart of our topic today, how to close the digital gap, let's discuss the current state of luxury. So I would like that we start talking about, like, how do you see the industry today, especially, I mean, we are starting 2022, 2 years after the pandemic, and it sounds crazy, but I guess you have seen like many changes. I would like to understand from your side, like from your perspective, like how the industry has been evolving in the last years.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think if I have one word I'll summarize is acceleration of a lot of things. And I'll go into a little bit more detail. I think the first one is, as we all know, it was an unprecedented year. You said 2 years, we're still in this pandemic. Start of the pandemic, luxury industry saw a huge hit, both in terms of revenue and profit. And we were like, oh my God, what's going to happen to this industry if consumers are just focusing on necessities? But actually, the industry has recovered really, really well, and we're calling it a V-shaped recovery. So while the demand dipped initially, now we are seeing a huge growth in demand. So pre-pandemic, our consumer demand on Google searches within luxury was growing at 10-15%, and now it's growing at 20-25%. So actually, there's a real acceleration of consumers moving online of this. I would caveat, though, the recovery isn't even across everywhere. Some big companies are becoming bigger, and we are seeing some of those smaller companies are still struggling to meet the means. US and APAC are leading the charge on recovery. Europe is still sort of following the trend, I would say. I think then if we think about, that sort of recovery, like quite impressed with how accelerated the recovery was. I think the second thing is just consumer landscape. That's shifted, I feel like, quite a lot. With travel being blocked, with spend repatriation in China, we feel like a lot of companies are now focusing on the domestic clients, which previously, if you're from London or Portugal or Spain, like the focus was probably less so, but now it's more so there. So I feel like that is happening. Window shopping, I feel like all of us remember going to the stores, looking at what the different displays are, but now all of that is happening online. I feel like people are looking at all the videos, they're getting inspired of what are celebrities or influencers wearing. So a lot of that inspiration, discovery phase, or what I call as window shopping, has started happening online. And of course, like needless to say, the last thing I would say is e-com has really accelerated. Some of the stats we hear is that 10 years of acceleration happened in a couple of months. So that's the pace with which I would say e-com accelerated. So yeah, so I think real acceleration of recovery, which is good for the industry, of consumers, they're shifting, they're still volatile, and that I feel like is still continued to be quite volatile. And then sort of e-commerce, or I would say actually it's become omni-channel. The distribution has really sort of, it's not no more the siloed approach here. So yeah.
I guess it has been like 2 years, well, almost 3 years of like craziness, but also like exciting things, right? Like how like the industry has been moving. And you have mentioned like 3 elements: e-commerce, responding to consumer demands, and building a strong brand equity. Let's start with e-commerce. And I was reading, like yesterday, I was reading an article. You mentioned like the acceleration, and you mentioned like the stats and the growth of the industry. I was reading the other day also like the online share of luxury. I have on my notes, the online share of luxury sales nearly doubled from 12 to 22% during the pandemic, and this figure is expected to grow by 30% by 2025. You mentioned that. Could you tell us more about like what you have been observing at Google, and which brands have been like the big players in this like e-commerce like environment?
Yeah, no, you're so bang on. I feel like we've seen like this 100% year-on-year growth. Like, the numbers that would feel very crazy before the pandemic, actually the e-commerce has doubled. And now even some of the companies, when they share their plans with us, they're still like thinking of growing at that pace because of where the consumers have shifted and online growth is happening. I think what we are seeing at Google is, like while the demand has really accelerated, actually brands have lent in and retailers have lent in quite a lot. So as I mentioned, now it's about 20% year-on-year demand, but actually retailers are at 40% year-on-year growth. So the kind of clicks they're getting from a business is almost double. So they're really leaned into building their digital capabilities. I think when you think about e-commerce, who's doing it well? So I would love to first talk about what is it that we call is well, right? And there are a lot of companies that are doing well. So I would say the few things that, what we say is well is people who invested in digital capabilities. Either they would have invested before the pandemic, or some of the brands actually in 3 months, they were able to build their website from scratch. They were able to get their customer database going. So, they were really agile and accelerated building those digital capabilities fast because they were not confused, is digital a thing or not? They actually said digital is going to be a thing. So let's just get all in with this. So I think first is just building those digital capabilities. I think secondly, what we saw is they maintained the relationship with their customers in some way or fashion. So how were they engaging with their consumers and really understanding who the consumers are? And, we talk about luxury industry, but if we take it even to travel, who've been so badly hit, they are also talking to their customers. They're not letting their customers go and trying to maintain that dialogue. So I think back in the days, it was always about short term, let's get the sales going. But now people are realizing actually that brand and building that connection with the customer is part of the growth trajectory quite a lot. And the last thing I would say is the growth mindset. I know like that's not really a digital capability, but for me, it really stood out that in companies where, the marketing teams and e-commerce teams were coming together, the data and the technology, the analytics, the cross-functional organization coming together and really thinking, how do we grow faster? How do we accelerate faster? How can we get more profit? How can we get more revenue? That thinking of the growth mindset to just keep testing, keep learning, and keep asking for more was really stood out. So as I said, like, those are the kind of elements of what we said, like working well, like, like they really thought about the digital capabilities. They really thought about investing in that dialogue with the customers. And they weren't shy. They weren't waiting for perfection to progress. They were actually progressing over perfection. So like that growth mindset for me. A lot of companies come out. So I'm going to name a few examples, but I'm sure there are tons and tons of people who are doing a really good job. I think from a marketplace/e-tailer perspective, I would say Farfetch for us has been like one that really stands out. They've really lent into their e-growth mindset. They've really strengthened while others pulled back. They actually use digital marketing as a business growth driver, right? They've really lent into automation and technology. Everything is like looked at the eyes of how do we scale it rather than trying to do manual interventions. They really thought of, okay, we're not going to go with fixed budget because sometimes the demand goes up, sometimes the demand goes down. We're actually going to look at it as one thing. I think the other side, I would say the LVMH and the Dior's of the world, like they really stand out. Traditionally they were very, very physical experience and in-store experience related, but now they're thinking about website personalization. How do we actually do real-time inventory modeling? How do we think about, what our customers' personas are? How do we actually be truly omni-channel, as well? How do we build our own D2C? Like I would say those are few examples that I would like to share of how they've really accelerated their journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yesterday, in fact, Farfetch CEO was participating at the Performance Summit. He had a very interesting and insightful conversation with our Launchmetrics CEO. And yeah, it's a great example, definitely, of how to do it in e-commerce, of course. But I would like to ask you, like, still in this topic of e-commerce, like, of course, it has its challenges, especially for the luxury sector, and I think we can all agree that it is that luxury. It is the time for luxury that they start accelerating that process. And having previously relied on online department stores and other like wholesale channels for the majority of their online sales, there are some brands like I don't know, Gucci or Alexander McQueen that are investing more in their own channels, in their own e-commerce, and improving that part internally, just because it gives them like greater control over inventory, customer relationships, sales, and so on. So my question is, having that strong like digital boutique presence, what does that mean for the physical stores? Like, what do you think is going to happen? I guess this is like the key question always. Is it going to disappear? Is it going to still be like in hybrid mode? What do you think? What's your perspective from Google?
Yeah. So so we don't think the stores will disappear, right? That will still continue to be a really important and play quite a dominant role as well, I would say. If you think about the statistics that are going out in the market, 30 to 40% of the sales will be online, but actually 60 to 70% are still happening in the stores.
Yeah.
However, I would say is the role of the store would change. And that is where the industry is trying to adapt quite a lot as well. What do I mean by that? I think when we did our research, we saw kind of two things that really stood out for us. One is customers are really looking for experiences and entertainment and engagement of some sort. They're looking at, like, I feel like Selfridges and Harrods are doing amazing things there, where they are building, restaurants, they're building beauty bars, like, they're trying to build those immersive experiences in their stores to engage the customers who walk in. The second thing we saw is that the role that customers have for online and store is actually quite different, and it's quite defined. So when we asked them, like, why do you go online and why do you go to a store? Majority said, okay, to browse, to discover, to select, to compare, to see what others are doing is where I would go for online. But to experience the product, to feel it in a real life, to see whether it fits me and things like that is when I go to a store. So I feel like the store role will become more defined over time. And I think the use of digital in store will become very, very important. And we're already seeing a few innovations, immersive virtual rooms, interactive fitting rooms, and things like that. People using apps to check in when they go into a store, and then, payment cashless checkout. So things like that. We're seeing, what I would see is that digital will start playing a huge role in your in-store experiences, and it will become more an experiential silo. I think we still see some companies who operate as, this is an e-commerce team and they have an e-commerce target, and this is a store team and they have a store target. I feel like that will disappear from an organizational perspective, and they should just come together as one team, because customers aren't thinking so much about different channels. They want the same experience: tablet, app, store, website. Everything should be similar or based on their needs.
Totally true. I was thinking, while you were like speaking, I was thinking to myself, like, when I go to a store, sometimes I don't know, I've seen something on the e-commerce, and I get like really upset when I don't find it on store, and I always think, oh my god, I need to download the app. Why I never download the app? So yeah, I guess in the future, in the next few years, we'll have that mindset of, well, if I have everything connected, like my whole experience, like shopping, is going to be much better. So yeah, I was just like looking at myself.
But we are the consumers. I think that's the point. Let's put ourselves in those consumers' shoes and, think about it. We don't, in my shopping experience as well, I don't really differentiate that much, right? So that's going to become the future.
Yeah, it's true. And still talking about the pandemic, it has brought like enormous shifts in consumer demands across all sectors, but even more in the fashion luxury industry. Like for example, the rise of loungewear, athleisure, and when it comes to consumer insights, of course, like Google has a lot to say. Like you are like playing a key role in this area. So I would like to ask you, how can brands respond to these changes that we are living today, and how they can be more agile? What's the place of technology and data in all of this?
No, I think definitely. I think we saw a huge shift in trends, loungewear and streetwear and all those things became super popular initially. And then towards the end of Q4, we actually saw dresses and heels. They actually overtook the demand. And we're still seeing the demand is actually quite volatile. And we're seeing, across geographies and across categories, it keeps changing. So I think one tip I have for people here, you can actually go to Google Trends and kind of keep monitoring, where the demand is, so that you can flex with it. But the more interesting question, Gina, you asked is what's the role of data and technology? And I think that's where we at least say invest a lot in automation and machine learning algorithms, because now with digital, a benefit or a curse is you've got so much information and you've got so much data, right? So if we think about as Google, we know, okay, mobile or desktop, is this person in London or Spain? Is this person, what are they kind of searching? They probably won't tell their loved ones what they're thinking, but they'll actually go to Google and search, how do I heal, or how do I protect someone, et cetera, right? So we get so many signals. So we've really invested in our automation and machine learning technology to have these billions and billions of signals and rely on the machines to make those decisions. And what we saw is over the pandemic, actually, the brands that invested in automation started succeeding. There was a very strong correlation with the brands that started investing in automation, started doing much better and started responding to those demands. So I talked about Farfetch earlier. So they are sort of very heavily automated with us, right? So if the demand goes up, they don't need to worry. They'll actually capture the demand because they've set up the processes in a way that it's agile. While in some other organizations, if the demand goes up, they'll have to first go to their finance teams, tell them, okay, the demand is up. Then finance team will do some calculations and then be like, okay, actually, by that time, the demand has actually disappeared. So it's all about how do you set the processes, knowing that the volatility may continue, and actually use technology and machine learning. I think I feel like everything time you start a new initiative, think about how can tech and machine learning and automation do it better, is my thought.
Absolutely. I mean, that's definitely something that we always try to communicate to our customers at Launchmetrics, like how important is the data to save resources and save time, save absolutely everything. You are not blind just launching campaigns. You know exactly like what your consumer wants, what are the platforms that they are using, what are the brands that they like or not, or the creators that they prefer or not. So yeah, I guess data is a big thing. And talking about the new generation of consumers, I guess this is another hot topic for the industry. Everyone has been talking about millennials and Gen Z. We can say that this is not the consumer of tomorrow, but the consumer of today. Yeah. Many luxury brands are already trying to target these new generations. And at the end, if we think in Gen Z, for example, we are talking about a generation of consumers that is super digital. They are like the omni-channel. It's not like me. They don't need to think about downloading an app. It's natural for them. But then apart from that, they have for example, a conscious consumerism mind. So that's something that is quite important to consider. So I would like to ask you what do you think about luxury brands today with respect to this new generation of consumers? Are they really adapting the way of doing marketing, of communicating to them, connecting to them? What you have seen in that sense?
Yeah. So I think firstly, absolutely agree with you. This is such an important segment of consumers, and they have much higher expectations of brands than the previous generation as well, right? They want the brands to entertain them. They want the brands to understand them. They want the brands to be relevant to them. And they also expect the brands to play a role for the future. You talked about consciousness. Some of the stats we see is 72% of the consumers are only going to purchase if their values connect with the consumers, right? earlier it would be like price, discount. I'm not saying those are not important factors, but like the values are really coming to the forefront. I think 85% of consumers said that sustainability and what the brand is doing on sustainability is really top of mind for them. So they have much higher expectations of brands, and brands need to live up to those expectations to stay relevant to these consumers. So what we are seeing brands are doing is, I think, brands are really, I think, if I think about some of the successful brands we would think about, like Dior, Prada, Gucci, like they've really invested in building these meaningful connections with their customers. It is about talking. The customers are always on, and they are showing up for their customers always on as well. They are thinking about new ways of engaging with these customers, and they understand the importance of that. So it's not just doing it for the sake of doing it. It's actually business reason for that as well. We see that, brands that have purpose and they're communicating to the customers actually see 30% more growth in their revenue and profit and their value metrics. So it is good for the business. And the way they do it is, I think, developing content, being really clear about how do you excite, entertain, help your audiences, inspire them. I think Balenciaga Simpsons collection come to mind quite loudly for me, is how it engaged, how it thought about its audience. And there are many more examples like that. But like, how are they thinking about that storytelling and that emotional, connectivity with the customer, so that it's not just a scroll of the screen, but actually your long-lasting impact in your customer's mind through developing that content. I think being very careful of the platforms they work with. There's a lot of like privacy, security, brand safety. So I feel like, a lot of brands are coming to us to be very conscious that they want to work with brands that are more diverse. They want to work with brands that are focusing on sustainability as well. So, we at YouTube, we ask independent auditors to come and see how diverse we are. And we're quite proud that, compared to other channels, we rate as one of the most diverse and fully representing the economy. Similarly, thinking about what are those platforms that are representing their values, and they are becoming more platform, they're adapting their creative to that platform as well, so that they're speaking to their audiences in different manners based on where they're finding them. And then last, I would say, is measuring and learning. I think that's quite important that, as they're engaging with these audiences, so that we measure and we learn what is working and what is not working well with these customers as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking last year we released a report about the power of TikTok creators. It was talking exactly about that, like how to connect with these new generations through a new platform. I mean, not a new platform, but a platform that is like maybe different in the way of communicating, of doing like a storytelling, connecting with consumers. So obviously for some like major like luxury groups or luxury conglomerates, it can be crazy to think TikTok is it like for me that at the end, yeah, I guess you're right. Like if you want to connect with that generation of consumers, you definitely need to adapt the way you are doing storytelling and communicating all of these values that are so important for them.
Exactly.
And this comes to one topic that we really like at Launchmetrics, that is talking about like brand equity and brand performance. Well, in fact, this event is called Performance Summit. That's the reason why. And I would like to ask you, because obviously when we are talking about brand equity, is this concept that is so intangible sometimes, but at the end of the day, we know, specifically in the luxury industry, it's really important, it's super critical for brands. And it's a bit connected with what we were talking before about the new generation of consumers. So I would like to ask you, like, what brands do you think have been like an example? Again, you say that you don't like to give us specific examples, but maybe not an example, but a standard for the industry, that when you think in that brand equity, you think in them, and they can be like a reference for the rest of the companies.
Yeah, I think I like, Gina, that you're poking me for more and more examples here. But I think some of the brands I mentioned earlier, like I would say the mega luxury maisons, Dior, Prada, Gucci, for me, really stand out in terms of building that brand equity with their customers. I think they're very clear about, the brand is important part of their positioning. They are also more expansive in thinking about it. So what are those consumers, and I would say the old mantra still stands true, right? Think about your customers, make sure you're relevant to them, have a clear value proposition. So that all is clear. I think what I would say the digital world has brought about is being digital first. One of the examples I like to give is like Nike creative team. They actually don't do creative mock-ups on a page or a print anymore. It's more all on mobile, because they know that their customers are actually all digitally savvy, and that's where their consumers are. So how do you in your day-to-day actually embed being digital first mindset in your operations? I think always on, I touched upon that earlier. Your customers are always on, right? So you're that constant engagement that you're finding with the customers as well. And then the last, I would say, on the measurement piece is the lasting momentum. The audiences are engaging, like, the content, even days and weeks after that you've produced it. And how do you kind of maintain that lasting momentum with that? We started, the few years ago, we would talk about views and how many views you got, but actually now people are saying engaged views. We want to know whether the customer is not just skipping my ad, but actually saw the ad, did something with it, and actually went about doing something. Measurement of those kind of metrics has become even more important. So how do I understand, have I taken the customer from this journey to this journey? How do I understand what actions they've had? And how do I understand not just in the now, but what it built for my brand equity in the long term as well? So I would say those are the kind of things. I think we did a report with you as well on long impact of video. So for us, like, video is a big role that it plays, because for luxury specifically, video is about storytelling, and luxury is and always has been about storytelling. And how do you build that connection with the customers? So I think video, I feel like with the fashion shows going digital, it's just exploded on YouTube for us, and we're seeing that customers are just sort of engaging with that content days in, and a lot of views are getting gathered, but we also start now reporting on engagement of those views, and it's not just in millions, so many people are watching, but how long did they watch for, etc., etc. So yeah.
So I guess, like, going one step further in the way you like understand, right, like, consumers' behavior with your brand, right?
Exactly.
Okay, I guess I have my last question, and then we can jump into the questions from the audience, because I see on my screen I always have like the bubble appearing here. So I guess there are like a lot of questions from the audience. So my last question, I was mentioning at the beginning of the conversation, like, we're going to talk about how to be more strategic and how to be more agile. I guess there are like many insights that you have already shared with us, but I would like to ask you, like, what will be, like, summarizing your recommendations for the industry to become more strategic, more agile, and I guess more competitive in this like changing landscape that we have today?
Yeah, I would say first is test and learn. That for me is most important, because that just, growth mindset is the second thing. Don't settle for good enough. Think about, everyone else is growing 50-60%. How can you grow faster? I think that would be second. And customer is the key. So I think really focusing on that and building your capabilities as fast as you can. Don't wait for perfection. Build the car while you're driving the car, is what I would summarize it as.
Okay, perfect. So we are going to start reading some of the questions from the audience. The first question is, could you tell us what the demand is compared to pre-pandemic levels?
Yeah.
Will you have these numbers?
Yes. Don't have all the numbers at the top of my head, but I think what I would summarize briefly is, so in terms of consumer demand within luxury, we're currently seeing at about 25% year-on-year growth on Google, while pre-pandemic levels, they were roughly around 10%. Now, this varies a lot by geography. In the US, for example, it's around 40% year-on-year, and the US was also earlier at around 10% mark. So US has really skyrocketed. Asia has really skyrocketed as well. While in Europe, actually, for UK, I would say just in Q4 is when the growth started ticking up as well. The demand levels are still high. These are all year-on-year growth levels. The demand levels are still high. The queries we get is in billions, but in terms of growth, this is what it is. Then in terms of categories, I think we touched upon that. Loungewear, streetwear, we're still seeing quite a huge demand there. We saw dresses and formal wear actually declining for the majority of 2021, but actually in Q4, dresses, heels, formal wear, really, really shot up again as well. So the category demand, we're still seeing quite a lot of volatility. And the third thing we saw in the demand was just discount driven. Actually, this is quite a new behavior we've seen. We've never really seen luxury searches very discount led. But because of, some of the retailers offering those promotions of last year, like Black Friday was up 170% year on year for us. So, those discount led queries have started creeping in now for luxury as well. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I was thinking right now, like, what about China? Because it's true that like the industry has been talking about China like in the last since the pandemic has started, like, and how it is growing obviously like more than the rest of the world, and the potential of China. I don't know if you have like any insights or any numbers.
Yes. So Google doesn't operate in China because of reasons we would not get into in this webinar. But I think generally we've seen that there's a lot of spend repatriation that happened in China. So of course, from a China perspective, there's huge growth because some of those Chinese tourists were coming abroad and now are buying in China. With the new regulations that governments are putting it in China, it's yet to be seen what that means. But a lot of luxury brands and retailers have also set up offices in China. So our assumption is that most of that spend is now going to happen in China, unless until brands find unique products or unique experiences when those customers are traveling. So that's why the focus for the rest of the world is on domestic, while China probably will still continue to grow because that spend is shifting towards them.
Okay. We have another question on the chat box. What advice do you have for young professionals looking to break into the luxury fashion and tech space? When should you focus your experience and education?
That's a brilliant question. I love this question. I think, firstly, I would say find your passion and focus there. I know this is a very cheeky answer and probably doesn't answer what you've asked, but I would say if you find what you really love doing, then you'll excel in the space, right? If you're passionate about it, you'll do really well. So I would say find your passion points. And if you're like me, who has no idea, initially when I started my career, I have no idea what my passion points are. I just tried to do a variety of different projects. And then, I was an engineer by background. I didn't even know F of fashion, but I did over the last 15 years, I've been doing fashion projects. So I just got into it and then I realized I like it. Then I got into digital and I realized I like it. So, explore. You have amazing opportunities in front of you. Digital acceleration has just started. Fashion and technology space intersection is not going anywhere for many, many years to come. So there's a lot to do there. I know my nieces and nephews are getting crazy about metaverse. They're getting crazy about influencers. So there's this plethora of opportunities. I think find your passion or dabble with different things. I don't know. Stay authentic to what you like, I think, and you'll succeed is my mantra of life.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, it's crazy.
What would you say? Please, you share.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking like it's crazy today when you ask like a kid, what do you want to do when you're like bigger, and they say, I want to be a YouTuber or TikToker or things like that. It's like it's nice. I mean, if it's what you want to do,
yeah,
go for it. Well, I guess we just arrived to the end of the session. I want to thank you, Rupi, for being part of the Performance Summit. It has been an incredible conversation, really insightful, with a lot of tips, with a lot of relevant information that I'm pretty sure is going to help our audience for their strategy this year. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me, and hope everyone enjoyed the session as well. Have a lovely evening as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I just want to remind for the people that is still connected, we have the last session of the summit today. With Klarna, the fintech that has totally disrupted the industry. So you just need to check it out on your links access to join that session. And thank you so much for participating, for joining today's session. So see you soon. See you in the next session. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Rupi.